Okay, so the first question is, what is learning catalytics? Learning catalytics is a formative assessment and engagement platform for students to use in the classroom and outside of the classroom, so that instructors can get a very good sense of where students are, what they can do, and make use of that data in real time. So the question is, how does learning catalytics work? And the answer, learning catalytics is a bring your own device platform, which means that students bring their smartphone, their laptop, their tablet, whatever device they have that can access the web, and they use those devices interactively with their instructor in the classroom. And that means that their instructor can use their device to get data from students. It means their device also prompts students to engage with their peers. So the device actually promotes social interactivity inside the classroom versus having students really buried inside the device the whole time.
Wow, that was great.
How did you come up with the idea for learning catalytics? So we were really inspired to create learning catalytics because of a frustration with a lot of the existing hardware and software solutions out there, primarily clickers, but even a lot of the software solutions really limited students to the same kind of limitations that clickers have, which is primarily multiple choice questions. And the issues we saw with those were that, one, it was really hard to come up with really good distractors for those multiple choice questions, which meant that when you ask these questions in the classroom, you could often potentially miss out on what students are really thinking because you didn't have the right distractors in your question. And of course, those distractors are really hard to write, even if you can come up with them. The other issue we found was that the multiple choice questions just weren't as authentic as we'd like them to be, because when you're asking a multiple choice question, you're really having students, when you're asking, let me start from the beginning of that sentence. When you're asking a multiple choice question, you're really having students just recognize the correct answer, versus what we really care about is whether they can produce a correct answer from scratch. And so we'd really like students to engage in the question directly by constructing something rather than just selecting the correct response. And we were really prevented from doing that from a lot of the existing technology. So we were inspired to create something new. And oftentimes what we did was we actually had questions that were multiple choice that had been used in the past, and we said to ourselves, well, what would these questions look like if we just threw away the answer choices and had students respond to the question directly, whether that be picking a point on an image or drawing a vector or whatnot. And so that's actually how a lot of the different question types for learning catalytics were born. The question is, how does learning catalytics help students to develop their critical thinking skills? So because we propose these very open-ended constructed response tasks to students, we can give them really meaty questions, questions that are very conceptual in nature, questions that really require them to really produce something new. And through that, we can really encourage students to develop better critical thinking skills, because students are not just sitting back picking the right answer, they're actually developing something from scratch. It really forces students to think more critically about the concept and understand how to develop something from scratch.
Yeah.
One way in which we really encourage critical thinking skills inside learning catalytics is through the automatic grouping feature. So what we really do there is we encourage students to have more productive conversations by really intentionally and intelligently placing them into groups for discussions of these questions and their responses with their peers. And through that process of forcing students to articulate their reasoning to a peer, that I think a lot of conceptual development can happen. Okay, so the next question is, how can learning catalytics help improve learning? So one of the ways that learning catalytics improves learning is by really tightening the feedback loop between students and instructors. So instructors can find out instantly where students are, what the misconceptions are, and because the questions that students respond to can be very open-ended, the instructor can really let the misconceptions students have bubble up organically. And there may be surprises. Oftentimes there's things that students don't understand, or they understand something in a way that you're not expecting. And by getting those responses to those open-ended questions, you can let those things come to you in an open-ended way, let those misconceptions bubble up organically, and through that, adjust your instruction in just the right way to address those misconceptions. So you can, as an instructor, you can really tailor your instruction very quickly to exactly where your students are. The way that learning catalytics works to help improve learning from the student perspective is that it helps students know right away what they understand and what they don't understand. So when they leave class, when they go home to start working on a problem set, start preparing for an exam, they know exactly what they have to study, what they have to work on, and what they need to build on. And they can start that process in class when the instructor's there, when the instructor can help answer their questions, versus at home when they need to be working on their own. So one way that learning catalytics helps engage students in the classroom is by making them a part of the learning process right away. So students know that the learning has to be active and that they need to be a participant in the learning from the very beginning. That it's not a matter of sitting back, listening to what the professor says, and then going home and trying to work on their own. That they're engaged because they know that they have to be active right away in class, working on these questions, working with their peers, having discussions. And so that helps engage students. Another way that learning catalytics helps engage students is by giving the opportunity for professors to pose much more interesting tasks for students to do. So it's not just a matter of voting A, B, C, or D every single time. It's a more, students get more interesting tasks to work on. So from their perspective, it's just a more engaging experience. The next question is, what does learning catalytics allow you to do that you couldn't do before? So what learning catalytics allows me to do is it allows me to see exactly where students are misunderstanding something. So I can see exactly where the reasoning breaks down, exactly where students are having trouble, so that in the moment I can adjust my instruction dynamically to better serve students at all levels. Another thing that learning catalytics helps me to do that I couldn't do before. Let me start that again.
Sure.
Just that part.
That's all right. We can start from the beginning if you want.
Yeah, I think that first part's fine, I think.
Okay.
Let me just say, I just want to make another point there.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that learning catalytics helps me to do that I couldn't do before is it helps me start that again.
Yeah, sorry.
Learning catalytics gives me complete visibility into what's happening in the classroom. So I can understand what students are understanding, what they're not understanding. It can help me get that data asynchronously as well, so I don't have to change the flow of the class to get that information. Students can send me messages, they can give me feedback about when they're getting confused, both when we're engaged in an activity and also when we're doing some other kind of activity during class. So it gives me that total visibility into what's going on, which is very powerful. So the last question is, what one piece of advice would you give an instructor considering using learning catalytics? The advice that I'd give an instructor considering using learning catalytics is to think of introducing it into your classroom as an incremental, iterative approach. So don't think of it as an all or nothing. Either I keep what I'm doing today, or I totally throw away all of my lectures and make it completely interactive. That's a very daunting task, and it makes it seem like you need to do a lot of work to get started. And the truth is, you don't have to do a lot of work to get started. Start by introducing just a couple of questions into your class at different points during the class period. See the kind of feedback you get, see the kind of engagement that you get from your students, and then that'll motivate you to want to put in the extra time investment to then go further, to add different kinds of questions, add peer discussions, add a team-based activity, and to think of adding this to your classroom in that incremental way, so that you really can get the full benefit without having to do a whole lot of work on the upfront.
Excellent. Can I choose your name and title or affiliation?
Yeah. So my name is Brian Lukoff. I'm one of the co-founders of Learning Catalytics, and I'm now the program director for Learning Catalytics at Pearson Education.